Hi, everyone. Welcome to Good Enough Today, the podcast where we share stories from people who are showing up authentically, even when life gets tough. I'm your host, Cheremma Lee. I'm so excited to share with you the new guests and interviews we have for Good Enough Today for 2026. But I have to admit, we're still in the lab. We're trying to make things right and ready to go for 2026. So I'll ask that you guys just bear with me while I work on living up to the Good Enough name and accepting that sometimes it's progress over perfection, and slow and steady does win the race. So while some people are preparing for a new year and a new me, I'm working on improving and progressing through this year and making myself better. And I hope you are too. And I'd like for you guys to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube and see what's going on behind the scenes with Good Enough Today. I'd also like to remind you that even when life gets tough and things are looking bleak, you can stay hopeful for tomorrow and remember that you're good enough today.
Hopeful for tomorrow, good enough today. Oh yeah, hopeful for tomorrow, good enough today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Good Enough Today, the podcast where we share stories from people who show up authentically in their lives, even when life gets messy. I'm your host, Cheremma Lee, and today my special guest is Mario Hall. Hello, Mario. Welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. Mario is an author, a leader, an inspiration in the community. He serves as a mentor. And today we're going to hear his story, but we're going to strip all of that away. We're going to figure out the man behind who Mario is and how he got to be there today. So thank you for coming on and being vulnerable with us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
All right, so we start every interview the same, and that is, how are you feeling today, physically, emotionally, and mentally on a scale from 1 to 10?
All right. So the PEMs. All right. Physically, I'm gonna say about a 6.5. Yeah, I like to work out. They stay in physical shape, but I had an injury, so over the last 3 months, I haven't been able to do much. And I can tell when my body gets, because I've had surgery, so I get my knees get stiff and joints get hurting, but that helps with the physical side of it. So 6.5 on the physical, emotional and mentally. So emotional, I would say 7.5 on those.
Nice.
Emotionally, I'm kind of a even keel kind of guy. Calm. So I'm getting to have a good control of my emotions. So get a little nervous sometimes when it's time to speak, but other than that, it's I say 7.5, and then mentally, all right, mentally, it's a little higher. I'll say about an 8.
Okay.
About an 8 on those. I like to focus on a healthy mindset. I call it a championship mindset. So I do every morning. I start my day with reading. I like to journal my thoughts. And then in the evening time, I like to pass football with my little son. So it kind of gets me mentally in a good place. So.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. I always have people come on here and they give their numbers. And I got some feedback from my listeners that I never give my numbers. And so I want to share my PM. My PM for today is probably about a 6 physically. I'd say 6.5 emotionally and a 6 mentally. I won't ever do 6.66 because I feel like that's
right.
It might be 6.2, but it's not going to be 6.66. But I would say those are my numbers. So I appreciate your feedback on that. Now, you mentioned a couple of things here, and you have a book that's called Blessed by Change.
Yes.
Okay. And I want everybody to know that you have that book, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I want to understand, what was your motivation for writing that book?
Yeah, good question. Really, that story is authored by God. You know, He gave me the vision to do it, and He spoke to me and told me to write a book about my story. You know, and so originally, you know, I would tell you, in school I like math and science.
Yeah.
English, that wasn't my favorite subject. So when He gave it to me that way, I was like, "Are you kidding me? You go tell me to write a book?" You know, I didn't want to do it or anything, but in my obedience and the story that He wanted me to tell, I started to write and journal my thoughts and came to a completion where the book came about. So it was thought, like I said, authored by God, and He wanted me to tell and share His story. Pretty much.
That's awesome. So you mentioned about the obedience, right? And I am going to get into the story, so don't worry. I'm going to get into the story, but I want to talk about How difficult was it for you to be obedient in that space?
Well, yeah, coming from where I came from, I didn't grow up in a church, so I didn't have a traditional upbringing in Christ, you know. So I knew of God, and had my grandmama and family members went, and but I just in my household we wasn't, you know, going on a consistent basis or anything like that. So I didn't know his principles, and so when obedience for me was really tough because I didn't know what it looked like, you know. I didn't know how to be obedient, and not growing up in church and knowing his expectations, you know, I liked my wrong behaviors. I rationalized my wrong behaviors. So when it became obedient, I started reading the word and it says obedience over sacrifice. You know, I had to really dive into that. What does that look like? And so to me, obedience became my hope, you know, and when I think about it, that's the focus. You know, obedience is the focus. What am I focused on today? And that led me to be obedient. And then the sacrifice was me giving up my old ways, old habits, you know, and that sacrifice, turning away my wicked ways, that became my foundation, you know, my faith and foundation. Those two things started to align, obedience and sacrifice, and the expression of love started to come out. And so obedience for me was tough early on.
Now, how do you know when you're being obedient to what God wants and you're being obedient to what Mario?
Yeah, great question. Great question. I know when I'm being obedient to what God wants is when I'm feeling good about it. You know what I mean? I'm feeling good. I know I'm walking in the right direction, and you know, I'm hearing God lead me in a certain way, and it gives me confidence because I'm like, oh, I'm following somebody who following the right way. When it's me on those, there's a struggle. There's a push-pull type of thing. I'm always fighting it, and I'm wrestling with it. And I know, like, man, I want to do this, but I shouldn't. And when that wrestle starts, I understand where the pull is coming from. You know, so that's how I know when it is. So if it's just me and I'm feeling good about it, I'm confident.
Now, do you get scared when you're being obedient to God?
Oh, oh yeah. Definitely get scared. Get scared. It's a joy in it, but it's like I just say my friends, especially, they tell me, you know, kudos to you. Like, man, you've been delivered. I used to be a certain way, and now that I'm not, the fear is, you know, will I go backwards? You know, will I slip up? You know, there's a lot of fear that comes with being obedient, but I like this acronym. It's called FAIL. First attempt at learning. So once I learned once I learned that acronym and I start walking that, I didn't get too high on myself. You know, I allowed myself to make mistakes. Allowed myself to, you know, learn a lesson from so-called losses, or if I did slide, I learned, like, what can I learn from this? So fear's definitely there, you know, to overcome it. You know, don't get too high on yourself. You know, we all make mistakes.
That's really interesting. I think that I hear fear and I'm like, yeah, I'm going straight ahead. But there's still times where it's like, oh, okay. I gotta muscle through this one because I don't want to. I don't want to do it. This is not comfortable for me, but I'm gonna keep pushing through. So I think it's interesting to hear how other people deal with their fear. Now, let's talk a little bit about your story. Where are you from?
Originally, I was born in a small town called Greenwood, Mississippi. It's in the Delta of Mississippi, and I was young there, so I'd probably moved from there like 6. My father was in the military, and so we moved around a lot of different places, and so I was able to, I always call it, never met a stranger. You know, I was able to go into a lot of places, meet new friends, and so we moved around, and we settled in middle school and high school years in a town called Columbia, Missouri, and so where I started, you know, meeting a lot more friends and playing sports and everything, and that's why I would tell you that's where my downward spiral started to happen. Rationalize my wrong behavior. I started a lot of things, and you know, peer pressure, social, you know, with social outings and stuff. So I was a high school football star, and so I had a lot of influences coming my way. So I mean, I talk about it all the time, is that drinking, smoking, and all that stuff was early on for me. So my story started right there, to where I tell about in my book that, you know, things started to happen that was like, man, how did I get here?
Yeah.
You know, how did I get to this point in my life? And this was before I even went to college. I ended up going to college at Mississippi State, where I met my wife, Delonda. We've been together now for 26 years, married 21.
Wow.
Who knows?
Congratulations.
Yeah. So we just celebrated our 21st anniversary in July. And we have 2 kids. We have 3 grandchildren. And so we got our own little family. And so that's where my basis of my story started. I think I have a salvation story and I have a call story.
Okay.
So that was the basis of it.
All right. So let's talk about, because I think it's interesting that, we have these transitions in life, right? And we look back and we're like, that's the person I was and this is the person I am now. Let's talk about who Mario was in high school. You talking about the drinking, the smoking. Would you have called yourself a leader back then?
Oh, that I thought I was. Where I sit now, I know I wasn't. I was a follower.
Okay.
But I thought I was leading. I was leading a lot of people wrong. Like, man, come on, man, do this stuff, man. We're good. And the guy that was there, I that's where I learned, or I developed a secret life.
Okay.
Hidden. I hid a lot of things from. If I tell my parents would probably tell you I didn't see that. I didn't see that. That was my dark side of it. So the drinking, the smoking that I was doing, having fun, I hid that.
Okay.
So as I went on in through life and went on to college, those things, I became good at a master of deception.
Okay.
That's what I call it. Master deception, where, things that I kept in the dark and things I did in the public. I wanted my image to be of a certain way. You know what I mean? So I want people to look at a great football player, the happy guy, that's always doing the right things. And then in the back, I'm ready to do, all the other stuff, the sin, temptations that led. So I had 2 sides to me, and that's where I would tell you the struggle started to happen. I started to mask certain things.
Okay. So that's a great, some great insight, because when you talk about hiding who you were, right? And so you weren't living authentically in that time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the question I guess I have is, if it wasn't true to who you thought you should be, why were you doing it at that time? What got you into that space where you felt like you needed to?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all like wrong behaviors, it's a little excitement to it, things like your parents tell you, don't do this, you couldn't wait to go do it. You know what I mean? Because you want to try to see what it is. And there's certain people that if you do something wrong and you like it and you don't get caught doing it, I'm going to continue to do it, to where it starts to spiral out of control. And I remember starting in high school, and then I went on to play college football, and we was at a bowl game one time, and the coaches specifically came in and they brought in some police officers and said, don't go to this place. This place is doing this. You tell a young teenager, they say, don't go, oh man, what's going on over there? And we went, and I kid you not, and it was like 4 or 5 of my teammates. We went, we were there, and they just told us
to stay away.
To stay away. So that was the excitement about it. Like, wow, it's going in, and you didn't get caught, and the rush of it. And so it just kept pulling me back into it. So I would try to walk away from things and do right, but I love wrong. It's like some just kept pulling me back, and so I struggled with that portion of doing right. So I knew right from wrong.
Okay.
If I tell you, I knew right from wrong, but it was always something that kept me wanting to do wrong.
That's a great. I mean, I think that inherently that's something that we all kind of struggle with. The wrong just looks different, right? It could be eating sugar. It could be, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, there's something that keeps us with that wrong behavior. So I wonder, for you said that your family went to church and things like that, but you weren't in church.
Well, my grandmother, aunts around me, my immediate family, my mom, dad, everything. My grandfather was a pastor, so he grew up in the church, and was around it. And then as he got older, he, work, things happen, things. So we didn't go to church side of it. So for me personally, I didn't grow up in a church. My immediate family didn't go to church or, know of, the word, but we knew of God, and we knew family members. And in Mississippi, there's a church almost on every corner. You know what I mean? So you know of it. It's just, you don't go, you stray from it. And, so I looked at God and church as a sometime thing. I can come to him here and there, or when I feel like, I've gotten in some trouble and I want to rationalize my behavior, but I want to come to him in desperation. I'm stuck in something. Let me pray. You know what I mean? That was my scope of Christ.
Right. So do you feel like as an athlete, there was some expectation for you to have this bad side or this edge? Do you feel like you needed to have that edge? Or how did you feel about that before you started to change your life?
Oh yeah, definitely. You play sports and you have that edge that you want to be cool. You want to be the man. For me, I like to stand out, center of attention. And in that image is everything. When we're projecting that image among people, and that's also allows you to have the relationships, with others and with women and different things. So the party atmosphere, all of that, when you go in it, you have this image of, I want to be the man. People want to be so-called leader, and so those images and things that you put out there is how they receive you. And so usually that's where, saying just having a bunch of people around you, and that's all that I was looking for then. Being an athlete is how many people that I can have around me and influence and good or bad, you know?
Okay. So did you feel like you were accepting of who you were at that time, or that people were accepting of who you were at that time?
Yeah. People were accepting of me because it's the fun guy, he's the center of attention and the life of the party. People would want me to come and get their parties hype, and get their outings going, and so there was always drinking behind that. So that was who I was, but inside, internally, I was feel like I was broken. I was, I knew that I needed to stop. I knew that, this path it was leading me on was self-destruction.
Right.
I knew all that, but I just kept going and going. But so people saw what looked like a well put together individual who was fun, outgoing, everything, but inside I was kind of broken. You know what I mean?
I think that's interesting because when you're broken inside, it has to go somewhere. That energy goes into something. And for a lot of people, it is drugs or drinking or sex or something, right? It goes into, or all of the above plus something, right? And so what did you do though when you were broken? How would you pull yourself out of it? Did you have people to talk to? What that looked like?
Yeah, I don't think I had anybody to talk to. I was all by myself, even though I had all these friends. You didn't want to share those things, you know what I mean? So I bottled them in the inside, and that's what you said led to other addictions. So I would take all that and try to, I would call it run the streets. You know what I mean? If it's, turn into a bottle, hitting a club, turn into X-rated, pornography or whatever it was, strip clubs. That's where I ran. I ran to those places and I tried to mask it and get it all out. And so when I came home or went to work, they didn't see that side, but it was a struggle, internal fight for me. And so it just kept coming and coming and coming, but the struggle was real.
I understand. I understand. Okay, so then you're in high school. Does the struggle continue in college? Okay.
Yeah, so it started in high school, and I tell this story is that one night I was driving, man, and I was drinking and driving. I'm 17 years old, and I just had a great game on the football field, and I went to a party. Me and a buddy were headed home. It's midnight, and I pull up to the lights, and they're blinking. So I think it's a stoplight, but now they become a stop sign when they're blinking red. The car in front of me is there, and the car takes off. And I think it's time for me to go because it's turned green. And as I pull off, my buddy just starts to scream. And as he's screaming, I don't know what he's screaming. I just hit the brake and I turn like, what are you screaming at? His eyes are bulged and he can't talk and he's pointing. And there was an 18-wheeler in front of my car and there was an 18-wheeler behind my car. And how they stopped, I knew it wasn't by the grace of God.
Yeah.
It tore me up, and so I was able to pull just enough forward because I couldn't open the doors. I would pull it just enough forward to where I got out on my hands and knees and I prayed to God. I was praying, I call it in desperation. I was praying to him, God, thank you for saving me and sparing me. I won't do this again. And I went right off to college. This was my senior year in high school. I went right off to college, and guess what I kept doing? I kept doing the same thing, because I didn't have a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know his principles, his expectations, but I knew this was him.
Right.
And so that's what I tell in my book, of those kind of stories, to where I struggle with internally with faith, and God spared me. And I have multiple stories that started to come about. And I think that's why he was telling me, share my story, write this book, because he was walking with me the whole time. But I guess I was running. I didn't know his expectations. And yeah, it continued on to college, and continued on into my, I call my personal adult life, when I got married and everything. And that was a Jekyll and Hyde, two-faced type of thing, because I had already been through it so many times. I thought I was escaping it, that just became who I was.
Right. Now, this is so interesting, because I feel like this is something that a lot of people go through, right? That you are fighting your inner demons. You don't know what those demons really are, but you know that they're haunting you, and you're running and doing these things. So you become like, you need an outlet of some sort, right? And so even through college, you're an athlete. First off, position did you?
I was a tailback out of high school, and when I got to college, I played both receiver and tailback.
Okay. I felt like if I didn't ask that question, people would be like, you're just not going to ask what position he played. Okay, so you're tailback and running back, taking all the beatings.
Yes, yeah.
And you are living this life of deception. What did that feel like for you internally?
Internally, I was struggling with wanting to do the right thing, wanting to just leave it all, let it go, and walk in so-called upright, walking with excellence, and just, being the best version of myself. And it wasn't there. So I just continued to mask it. So I wanted to do right, from high school to college to what's name. And people will always tell you, oh man, he's living it up. He's living the dream, At that time, after high school, I'm married and got a great job, and, I'm making money, but I'm spending it all too.
Yeah.
So it looks good on paper, but it's going out the door. And so, I mean, I took pride in my appearance,
right?
Spending money that I didn't have on my clothes, my wardrobes, making sure my cars was good. And, I didn't understand the purpose of money. That was God's money, and allowing me to use it to my resource to help others. The tithing, I didn't understand none of that. You know what I mean? So all my money was my money. And I was just using it on myself, and stuff like that. So
I want to ask you a couple of questions. One, I want to talk about your rock bottom. What made you change, right? And then I want to talk about your relationship, right, with your wife, and how you changing has impacted your relationship, and then how you have become the better version of yourself as you continue to work toward being the best version, and what that does for your relationship. So let's start with the rock bottom. What made you, tell me about what made Mario change?
The rock bottom. I think everybody comes to that point when you hit rock bottom, and you know it, because there's nowhere else to go. You're fighting it, you're struggling. And when I hit my rock bottom, I was ready to run. I did not want to face it. I didn't want to face myself. I knew I'd been doing wrong. And so my rock bottom was my dark side was exposed. My wife had found out some things and brought it to the light, and she questioned me on those. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to deal with that. And at this time I was struggling with alcoholism. I was struggling with, doing the right things, everything. And so when she confronted me about what she expected, I'm in the streets, and when she confronted me, I was ready to run. So I said, I want a divorce.
Yeah.
I've been married 10 years at this point, and kind of hit her like a ton of bricks. And like I said, I've been living a double life. So she didn't know this was going on. So when she exposed, she's shocked.
Right.
And so when I filed for a divorce, and I was ready to move, we had told both our sides of the family we're moving on. And my dad, I called him. A lot of phone calls I was calling, they was consoling me. Man, come on home, man. It's okay, man. We're gonna help you through this. And I called my daddy, and he was listening to me just like anybody else. And he said, how does she feel? Of all the questions, I'm telling you about me. And you asked me, how does she feel? And it was the first time that it felt like somebody cared about somebody else.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I'm your son, but you asked me how my wife feels. And so it made me stop and think like, oh, I just tore her world apart, 10 years. And now I'm going to walk away because I don't want to face this, And so when that happened, my wife was a strong, steadfast. She'd been going to church all her life, and she was a member of the church. And she said, you know what, during this time, I want to try this church out. And I think because my dad had that conversation, I was more open to receiving her. And so I said, I want to go with and I'm like, she was like, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, dude, whatever. Yeah, whatever. And so I followed her to church this Sunday. And mind you, I had already bought a ticket and I was leaving the following Thursday. Divorce was fine. I mean, it was almost final, but I was leaving. And I walked into this church and the pastor preached a sermon called, "Are You Smarter Than Hell?" And I could have sworn that everything he was saying was like, man, yeah, throwing darts at me and everything. And I was like, oh man, how's this guy know my life? And I was still stuck because I had been to church a lot of times with my wife over the years, but I had never joined the church. I was never a member. At this time, I'm 33 years old and I've never joined the church. And when I go to her that day and he preached that sermon, "Are You Smarter Than Hell?" It's the first time I thought I ever heard God's voice. It was an inner prompting, and I'm sitting in the back of the church. He says the doors of the church are open, and all I heard was move. And I started stepping over people. I started here's I'm running, leaving my wife, getting divorced, and then God has a different plan.
Right.
Changes my course of direction. So I go and join the church. And now I got to have a conversation. I got to come to reality because I'm joining the church. Things have changed. I told my wife I'm leaving. Yeah. So now we got to have a talk, So that was the first time that I really started to worry about somebody else's feelings and address my bad behavior, address me. And so I had to come clean with a lot of things that I was hiding with her, and so, I think it was a lot of eye opener, but she helped me through that, so it was, I love her for that. God used her as a vessel to bring me in my life to Christ on those. And so I thank her all the time for that and just being obedient. And she could have been, mad, upset, pissed off, why me?
Yeah.
But she listened to God's word and saved me. That was my salvation story of why. And that same day I heard God say to me, "Now write a book about your life." That was my rock bottom. At my rock bottom, it brought me to salvation.
Okay. Now, I have a few questions about that because you mentioned that it was the first time you really had started to think about someone other than yourself. Now, how does that work if you're in relationships, you're showing love to people, you have friends, right? How do you look at your relationships differently, platonic and your marriage and everything now that you are thinking of someone else? And then how did you navigate that space when you weren't?
Well, when I was only thinking about myself, I would tell you, I wasn't a bad guy. I was a father. I was a stepfather at this time, so I was still leading the family and I was married. But I only cared about satisfying my own selfish desires. So I was loving inwardly. I wanted you to give me all of y'all love and listen and, and love on me and affection and console me, but I wasn't giving it outwardly. So when this situation happened and I realized, oh, God must love me, he met me in my hard place, my rock bottom, and then called me, to, Christ, ministry, salvation. When I realized how much he loved me and he said, God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, right? I started loving outwardly. And I think my wife felt that love. My kids felt that love because I wasn't no longer about me. I wanted to put smiles and be happy on those. I wanted to learn to be a real leader, and as they start seeing that happen and unfold, and they're like, man, this dude is transitioning. And they start allowing me to be their leader and their provider. I'm leading them to church and I'm leading them in, Bible studies and, drawing their life closer to Christ. I started coaching my my youngest son's football team. I wanted to do that with my oldest son, but I was so busy with work, trying to search and find money that I never gave him that same love. I loved on him, but I didn't coach him because I was so. And then these things, like I didn't care about money. I didn't care about that. Let me do what I need. Time, TIME. Let me spend time with my family. And I think that love outwardly because I was getting it from God that way. I was giving it to them. They saw me differently.
Okay.
My relationships with other people were differently. It's just that's what I try to do now. Love outwardly and not inwardly.
Did you lose friends or people you thought were friends as you start transition?
I think there was a lot of distance, man, because they're happy for me. They see the transition and change. People are happy for you, but if they're not ready to change and they think, oh, you're gonna try to change them, you're gonna try to make them walk like you. And so I'm not a Bible thumper. I'm gonna always try to lead you, to God and everything. If you're open and you're asking me a question, I'm gonna be ready to speak on it, right? But the that was the hard part of all of this, is that when you have certain relationships, that you need to separate from, but you've been there so long, and so it's hard to pull back from those. If they're not pouring into me, I kind of realize that, I needed to separate it on those, but it's also one of those things, like, sometimes I might need to be present because they see the change.
Right.
They may be willing to change.
That's it.
Some people in there might never read my book, but they read me.
Absolutely.
That's a story that they're reading.
Absolutely. I think that I've seen this discussion a little bit on social media and on other podcasts and things like that about Christians or especially Christian women, feeling like they have to be obedient when their men are doing things that are hurtful, harmful, right? And I think that it's a very nuanced conversation and argument, because, everybody wants to say, if my husband or my wife did this, I'm leaving, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned about there being 10 years in. I think people forget that there's a lot of life in that, right? And so I really want to talk about, and your wife's not here, so it's going to be hard for you to kind of speak on her position, but the forgiveness that goes along with moving forward, right?
Yeah.
And then how were you able to have that conversation, those hard conversations with her, because you changed basically overnight, right? And so how are you able to then get that accountability for yourself and then be there to comfort her in the fact that now you've done wrong and now you're trying to do right and build that trust?
Yeah, that's good question. Good question. It's the walk. It's your walk. You got to continue to show up, and each day to show the action, show the steps that you're here. Because I would tell you that my wife was the leader in our family. She was steadfast. She modeled what it looked like, so I had a blueprint right before me, to walk in that way and just follow Christ. So it can day after day after day, you show up, you're obedient and everything. And women know when their husband is not, leading them directly, right? Correct. And so they become leaders. And in my situation here, the transition happened. And I think as my wife saw that I was leading in the right direction, it allowed me to step up the family, because now I'm led by Christ. Right. You know what I mean? That's how the order is. So it's no superiority. Like, I'm the man of the house, and you better watch and listen to me. I became the man of the house because that was of Christ, right? And they saw that I was leading a Christ-like life now. Now I can lead them, and they can trust that I'm leading them in the right direction. So, I became the head again, and my wife became, I call it equal, so there's a pecking order, but there's not saying I'm superior than her. I like it like this. I liken it to this. I'm the head, she's the neck.
Right.
Have you ever tried to move your head without moving your neck?
Exactly.
So when my head and neck move together, and in the obedience side of it, I don't make decisions without including her. And she trusts that if I do make a decision, then I'm leading them directly. And so we work in tandem, and so that's the obedience side, is that we're working together. We have a pecking order, but it's not that I'm superior or she's superior.
Absolutely. No, I think that's important to have that kind of conversation, because I feel like people forget that in romantic relationships, they're just like other relationships, even with your friends, anybody. You have to have, there's a give and a take, and there's not one person. And if it is, it's probably not going to work. Yeah. The person that you have to see all the time are your siblings, people that you live with, there are gonna be some times that are gonna be difficult. You just have to work through those and have those conversations.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about you making this transition. Was there somebody who was your guide? Was there anybody that you leaned on, that you created a community after you joined the church? What did that look like?
Man, I'm thankful for my mentor, but he's also my pastor from a church. I go to Greater Mount Zion here in Austin, Texas, and he became that person for me who helped me, guided me, and was just there with a conversation. You know, in that moment, there was a lot of growth that I was going through, and he's always showed up just being there as a friend, you know, as a person you can lean on, ask questions. This is new for me, right? So it's a new navigation, and because he was my mentor and everything, I was able to ask the right questions. I was able to, you know, when I got stuck in the word or something, you know, hey, explain this to me. You know, what does this look like? You know, and so now I'm watching my wife and I'm watching him and how they model it, and I'm just walking in their paths. You know, it's like, why reinvent the wheel when it's
they already have the blueprint.
They got the blueprint, you know. And so there was two people that I looked at, was my wife and my pastor, who was my mentor, and so that helped me, you know, guide it. But even in that walk, it was still a struggle because it took me 10 years to write my book, you know, because salvation, I heard it, I started walking in it, and I'm walking with God. I turned away from my wicked ways and sin and temptation, but then another form started, self-doubt started to creep in there. You know, I like I said, I've been a confident person all my life, you know, played ball, being a leader, and, you know, and just in my eyes was just confident in what I was doing. I'm like, now where's this doubt come from? Like, I started saying like, no, God didn't want me to write this book. I didn't hear that right. You know, and that was the enemy. He'll find some way to quick it. Like I say that his games don't change. There's new participants. You know what I mean?
No,
So the new participants come. Yeah, his ways don't change. It's I'm a new participant in this, so he had to come into me in a different way. You know, I didn't lack confidence, but then all of a sudden, when I'm new into this Christian walk, and I'm hearing God say, write a book, and now it's a doubt. So for 10 years, I would put a pencil, I would write something, I would pick it up, I would put it down. And then after about 2 years, I'm like, man, it's too long. Nobody want to hear from this. And I would slide it all the way out, you know? And so it took me 10 years until the culmination. I had another breaking point that, to get me over the hump, you know. But so that the doubt, I had asked for all the forgiveness of all my ways with my friends, my wife, and they had forgiven me, and I'm walking good. And then, where's this doubt coming?
Right.
You know.
Right. Okay, so you said you shouldn't have mentioned that second breaking point. Now we got to talk about it. So what was the next breaking point? Because I feel like, you know, we see the end result and we're like, yeah, you wrote a book, you must be special. I think that sometimes we discount the journey in that, right? What does that look like? Because I've heard people say, well, I don't know how you do it. Like, I just put one foot in front of the other and keep on trying to do it. And so what was that second breaking point for you?
Yeah. It was the self-doubt started to check in. Self-esteem started to go down because church hurt started to set in because I wasn't, in my eyes, living up to what I heard. You know, I thought God was trying to be perfect again, you know. I thought God had already spoken to me, given this vision. Why can't I complete this? You know, so my self-esteem started to go down, self-doubt, and I just put the book down, period. You know, so I didn't write. And then it started to struggle internally, like, man, am I failing God? Am I failing my purpose? Like, I know my purpose, but I'm not walking in it. And so when that started to happen, you know, I just stopped writing. And then the second turning point was, I got to a point, and I'll keep this long story. I shared this story about keep it short, is that I'm now not focused on Christ as much, but I'm back into work. I want to make all the money, and I'm diving into work. And I just had a great day at work. Sold 4 cars. I'm a car salesman by trade, and I sold 4 cars. And I had a story that come in. A lady came in and bought her last car of the day, and we had a great moment. So I'm go home and I'm telling my wife about this awesome day. And as I'm telling her, I just felt my body start to shift. And when it started to shift, and I liken it to this hot air balloon, somebody poke a hole in it, shh, there's a slow leak. That's what my body started to feel like. I felt like it was leaving. My soul was leaving. I started crying. I have a great day. I started crying out my eyes. And I'm like, why am I crying? You know, I can't talk. I'm like, hey, can you hear me? She's like, I hear you fine. I feel like my voice is leaving me. And there was a slow leak. And all of a sudden I get this wave of exhaustion. I can't stay up. My eyes are closing. And I tell her, I said, I got to go to sleep. And she's like, it's 7:30 on a Saturday. You sure you're going to go to sleep? And I was like, I got to go. And so I live on my bedroom's on the first floor. So I got up and walked from my couch to my bedroom, like 5 feet, 10 feet, you know? And all I remember is I hit my pillow and I started to dream, and that dream went black. That's all I remember. Well, I guess next morning, 12:30 Sunday morning, I wake up and I feel refreshed. My joints don't feel as stiff anymore. And I feel refreshed, and my wife is staring at me. She's looking at me. I was like, whoa, what are you staring at? And she's like, no, are you okay? I said, I'm perfectly fine. Like, I feel good. She's like, no, I've never seen anything like that. I said, like what? He said, you hit the pillow and you went to sleep in 30 seconds. And she said, look at you. So I looked down, I had all my work clothes on, and my shirt was drenched. My pillow was wet. And it's like I had been purified. And she said, I tried to touch you, you know, and you didn't wake up. You didn't move. And she said, it's like you was dead. I was like, huh? Never heard anything like that, you know? And she's like, yeah. She said, I couldn't move you. You didn't budge. She said, the only reason why I knew that you wasn't dead is she'd been putting her finger underneath my nose and she could feel me breathing. And so she just watched me. So when I jumped up, you know, I felt refreshed. I felt renewed, but I was thirsty and dehydrated. So I needed some water. So I started drinking bottles of water and it felt great. It came out of my refrigerator. This water felt like it was the best water I ever had in my life. And it was like the Spirit of God was being poured inside. You know, that's the way it felt. And I had a strong urge to go to church. And this is 12:30 Sunday morning. They say Jesus rose one early morning, Sunday morning. So I jump up and I stay up until it's time to go to church. It's 9:45 in the morning. And I go to the church and I walked in there at this time in my life because I'm struggling with self-doubt, self-esteem, church hurt. I'm down. I'm depressed. I call it bedside Baptist. I'm not actively going to church. I'm watching from TV, and a lot of time it's watching me. So I call him a bedside Baptist, but I have a strong urge to go back. So I go back into the church again. That you know, my salvation story happened. I go back in there, and that pastor gets up. And he says, I want to preach from you today from a sermon called, Are You Smarter Than Hell? So he preached the exact same sermon that I heard 10 years ago. And I'm like, wait, I know everything about this sermon. And I mean, it touched me, right? And I knew exactly. I said to myself, it's God calling. Is he calling me to ministry? Is this what it looks like?
Right.
Once again, I don't know. So I walked, I don't even tell my wife this. She goes and gets my son, and I walk to the pastor, and it's the same pastor. And I walked to him and I said, I feel like I need to talk to you. I think God called me here to hear that sermon, and I want to answer this call. And he looked at me and he said, well, in that case, we need to talk. Because I was supposed to preach another sermon today, and God spoke to him and said, no, preach this one.
Oh, wow.
You know, so he said, you know what else? I said, what is that? He said, do you believe in divine choreography? I said, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that is. Explain that to me. So he said, when God is orchestrating all of this, he will bring it together. He will, you know, have a message and change things and align it right. He says, I've only preached this sermon twice in my life. I said, whoa, you mean to tell me I was there twice? You know? And so he said, let's talk. So mind you, I hadn't told my wife, this is what I'm doing. That's a big, huge thing. I'm accepting a call to ministry. And so I said, baby, let's go out to eat. I need to tell you what just happened. So she was like, cool. So I Googled a restaurant. It's downtown Austin. And we go into this restaurant. We're eating and we're having good. I'm telling her about what just happened. And this lady walks up to me. I've never met her before in my life. It's a white lady. And she taps me on the shoulder and she says, excuse me, sir. You look like you've been to church today. I said, well, yeah, I have. I'm dressed up. I have actually. She said, can you tell me about your sermon? And I said, I sure can. You know, I said, well, the sermon was boom, 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 boom. Are you smarter than hell? And I said, I've heard it twice in my life and I felt like it was for me. And I said, man, I actually answered the call to this sermon today. And so I'm telling her about it. She said, that's awesome. She said, you know what today is? And I was like, no. She said, well, in your new beginning, God's favorite number is 8. And so I took the liberty, sir, to write this down for you. And she hands me a piece of paper, and I put this in my book because I'm like, nobody's gonna read this, right?
Yes, absolutely.
She hands me a piece of paper, and on it she had written 2 Corinthians 5:17. And that's the verse that says, therefore, if anyone in Christ, the old is gone, the new is here. So the lady was kind of telling me the night before the old Mario died, the new Mario came about. And that's when I heard God tell me again, now do what I told you 10 years ago.
Yes.
Finish that book. Yeah. And so that was the culmination of me starting. This happened in August of 2023. And I started just rewriting. So my book was called The Unfaithful Mind, The Right Way to Do Wrong. Okay. That was my book title. That was all about Mario. And God was saying, no, I need you to write a book that shows what I did to you, how I shifted you, how I changed you, how I got you to this point. And if I authored it, listen. So I changed the title called Blessed by Change, My Journey to Redemption. And I started rewriting my book. And as I started being obedient rewriting, I was able to finish it. And I finished that and launched it in Black Friday of 2024.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think that it's interesting because there's always this, even with doing this podcast, right? I'm not a podcast. I don't know anything about video. You saw me mess with this video. I'm over here fighting with the cameras. I don't know anything about this, but sometimes you feel a call to do it. And throughout the time, you're like, I'm not the person that's supposed to be doing it. It's like, am I supposed to be doing that? But there are always these things or these people who will say, no. And you're like, okay, I'm supposed to be doing this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to put my name in the hat and see how it works. And so I think that it's just interesting to hear from a different perspective to see. Now, I am interested in, what did your wife feel about your call? How did she feel? Because I feel like I'd be like, what? Yeah. Listen, this is a whole new thing, right? You want to be a supportive wife, but how does that work?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Let me say this to you. You just said something and it brought something to me, is that you felt called to do the podcast. And I'm sure, just like anything else in my call here, there was a inner struggle beforehand. Should I do it? Should I not? There was a tug of war. And you being obedient, you said, I'm going to let faith happen. I'm going to just walk in it, and you become successful. I'm a subscriber. I'm a subscriber. And you're very good at what you do because you make it comfortable, to just come and talk. And so you're walking in your purpose and your calling. I can tell you that right now, just by your demeanor and how you're doing all this. To answer your question, since she was been steadfast and she was a believer, in her life had started, early on as a child, early, what do you call it? A mother at an early age. So she had witnessed God help her through, at an early age. And so she had walked in a steadfast. She didn't probably think that I would be answering a call or walking in this. So it was new, because now I go from barely going to church to walking with God to stopping. Now I'm all in. Yeah. And I'm answering a call, and I ain't even consulted with her. You know what I mean? So it's like when she witnessed that and she thought it, I thank God for her, because he had already prepared her for this journey, this walk, and for when her husband was transitioned. So what she had been praying for, I realized it was for me to change. So God answered her prayers. Yeah. And so since God answered her prayers, she's watching it and she's looking like, wow, God, you really are who you say you are. I've been praying for this moment, and here it is. I'm walking in it. So she supports me. She pushes me to do better. She just says, keep walking, keep striving. And I give her confidence sometimes in her hope. Right. And her strength. She draws strength from me, and I draw strength from her. So I like I said, it's hard to answer that for her, but if I'm just speaking on her behalf and what I see from her smile, from her look and all that gives me hope. Yeah. And part of that is I can dwell on my destiny, leaving a legacy, and not on my past. Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And just for the record, I think your wife is just so everybody knows that
she's awesome.
Yeah, I think she's a pretty amazing person. So now you are renewed here. You got your book out. What is giving joy right now?
Oh man, like I said, joy for me, I'm simple. I'm a simple man, simple at heart, and it's the little things. Little things speak louder to me than anything. And the joy comes seeing my family. When like I said, if I see them smiling, I see them in good moods, and they're giving me the gratitude and allow me to lead and provide, that gives me joy. I draw my strength from that. Just being able to be a better man for them, and just leading them. And I like to call it like teaching them what a championship mindset looks like. That gives me joy because on the field, I was a champion. I won at many levels, and I took those principles and took them into life. And I take faith and hope and those principles and put them together, and it becomes a championship mindset. How do we win in life? That's the way I teach my kids, my students, my team that I coach, and to go into their schoolhouses, and be champions. Be nice and kind. Go on their playgrounds and be champions. Go on the field, and so that gives me joy. That the simple things of the all those characteristics, the things that I learned playing ball, and those life lessons that I had and struggles, I can turn around and give it to them now, and that's love. That's an action. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, that's amazing. Okay. So when you look back on things right now, because I feel like, and this is a question I don't usually ask, so sorry.
Come on, let's go.
But do you look back on me right now and have any regrets?
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I don't think so, because this is the walk. This is the journey God needed me to go down to move forward. If anything, maybe not coming to him earlier, there was a lot of times that I just probably wasn't as open. I went and sat in church. I heard great messages, you know, and it just didn't affect me and move me, but I don't think I was open. So if any regrets, I just wish my mind and hearts would have been open sooner. But I think this was the walk. This was the journey, and all of those things refined me and prepared me to be able to accept it and walk in my purpose, and if I didn't go through those things, I would have been too scared, too weak to do it. And now where I'm at now, I'm so locked in, that there's nothing I won't do or try right now. You know what I mean?
No, and I think that I thought that might be how you answered that question, but I wanted to ask because I didn't want to assume, but also I feel like sometimes, we get so stuck in what we're doing bad and poorly and how things are going. And as we start to change, we feel some shame, right? But I think that there's always that walk, and that walk, your yesterday doesn't have to be what your today is, right? And it doesn't have to define who you will be either. And so I think it's important for people to understand that even though there were some things that you might not be proud of in your past, those have shaped you into this now, and it's giving you a unique perspective to be able to reach people that you might not have been able to reach otherwise.
Because I had a lot of shame, I had a lot of doubt, and one of the things I had to do was come clean with those. What do they say? Get your skeletons out of the closet. And I wanted to share where I was at mentally in the darkness. I wanted to have all those out, so it didn't keep pulling me back. So the shame was happening because I was still trying to hide some things. You know what I mean? I was still, want to walk in faith and do right, but I realized early on that if I was gonna be true to who I am and grow and walk in this way, I had to take all of those shame and doubts and bring it to the forefront. I couldn't allow it to have power over me. I realized that was the devil holding me back, thinking, okay, they got something. So if I left that door, a little cracked, and it was shame and doubt, he was going to kick it in. So I kind of closed that door, and I told it all. I let my wife know what I was doing and told it to other people. And the more I told, the more confidence I came, and that shame and doubt started to leave, and I didn't let it to define who I was and hold me back.
No, I think that's very important, because that's going to help a lot of people, mostly because I know, just based upon the people I've known and the things that I know about people, that sounds crazy. like, hey, you shouldn't tell anybody. Nobody knows it's you and whoever. You just leave that where it is and keep on moving forward. And I think that, if we just leave it behind us, then
move on.
Forget about it. Your wife don't know. why would you tell her that? It's going to put her in a bad position. And what are you going to get out of that? Nobody's winning, right? But I think it's important what you said, that shame would have still been in the back, just waiting to overcome whatever situation it was. And so what made you comfortable with that though? Did you just know that there was no way you could be here if you didn't let go?
Yeah, I'm an all in kind of person.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I think this is why God told me to write a book, because when I'm all in, I'm all in.
Right.
I don't have a gray area, you know? And for me, when I started writing, I started telling people, man, I'm gonna write a book.
Right.
God told me to write a book. I'm like, man, come on, man. Really? And people would tell me, don't tell it. Don't tell it all. You know, I would leave that stuff. Like I would get that type of feedback. And I just thinking, like, the more that I thought about it, I was like, nah, that's gonna be in the back of my mind. I ain't told it, and it's going to eat it to the point to where I wasn't free. I was going to be still held captive. You know what I mean? So if I was going to walk in this and walk freely, when I came to Christ and salvation, like I said, I walked out of a club on a Saturday night, and I'm walking into a church on Sunday morning, and he calls me, and I give my life to, I came free, like arms wide open. And so with that freeness, I didn't want anything holding me back, you know? So I think that was just part of the natural progression. Let me come clean, you know? And when I did, you know, it may have been things that people didn't may want to hear, but I think it helped me, you know what I mean? Some of this was my healing.
Right.
Let me go get out of this trauma and everything out beside me. And so shame didn't take hold of me anymore. And it's tough for people to talk about those things. And I got friends and family members who will never speak about it. They've been through way more trauma and different things and darkness than I have, but it's closed off. And then you have mental issues that start to come up. Then you struggle internally, and then you need help, you know, therapy. And because of the darkness and you don't want to share it, do you go get help from a therapist when you should, you know? So I would thank God for that. I didn't want that holding power over me.
Right. No, I think that's really important, because I feel like as people, we're like, well, I want you to know this. I want you to know all of this, because your perception of me can change.
Yeah.
And I don't want your perception to be different. But I think from what you've said, that you just trusted God to say, okay, well, whatever perception needs to happen is what God wants to happen. And we're just going to walk in this way.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Being faithful is not easy.
Yeah, it's not. It's not easy. And being obedient to that, you know, and just, you know, sharing those things, it's very tough, but it's being vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, I drew strength from that. Like I was able to, like I said, complete a book. You know, I was able to lead my family differently, but I draw strength from that vulnerability. And then the Word of God just started to, you know, soothe me. Every time I started reading something, it was like, man, it's in this book. Wait, everything I was going through is in this book. I mean, I just started getting fascinated by that alone. Is that, wait, man, I've been walking and doing these things. Everything that, let's imagine that everything that I'm walking and living, God had already written about it.
Yeah.
And that just, I mean, so that just freed me up even more.
No, that is, I think that you're going to help more people than you realize, just by telling your story and them hearing how you have navigated this space. So I think that's great. What's hard for you right now?
What's hard is, what is hard for me right now? Hard is I every day just being, I don't want to say use it over being obedient, but every day, because I'm walking into a new life, a new growth, that getting in the Word every single day. Like my morning routine is to, you know, study the Word, you know, prepare myself. Hard is preparation, you know. For me, I believe God has called me to ministry to, you know, lead others, maybe preach different things. I think He will open up that door, but in this time, I'm preparing myself, you know, in that preparation, what I'm doing by myself, in the loneliness, by, you know, that hard work. It becomes hard, you know, that every day I know that I have to do this to get myself, I don't say caught up, so to speak, but not grow. In the back of my mind, it's hard that I want to, you know, get these thoughts out, right?
Mhm.
I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't walk in it. Am I behind?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Am I behind the curve? I'm too far back. I'm 47 years old. You know, am I behind? So, but preparation. God reminds me that David was in a waiting period before he was king. You know what I mean? So, I have to prepare.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the part that's hard though, right? Because you want to be here, like you want to know, like I'm trying to be an expert at this. I'm doing this in process. It's slow. You have to learn, right?
Yeah.
I get it. So you have to show up every day.
Yeah.
And like, what does this mean? How am I doing this?
Yeah.
It's a new learning process. You're a child again.
Yeah. Starting over.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. So, what would you tell someone who is at their breaking point right now? Are they're going down that slippery slope of doing the wrong things? What would you tell them to give them some hope?
Yeah, I've been asked this question, and it's always like differently, but I just think what I would tell them is you can come as you are. We always think that we got to be cleaned up, be dressed up, so to speak. Stop what I'm doing, you know. And if you are struggling, you know, give God a try, you know. Come in and help so he can help you with whatever you're going through in life. Don't worry about, you know, your past and your mistakes and things that you've been going through. You know, he will assist you. You know, don't try to be perfect.
Right.
You know, that's the thing.
You try to be perfect first, right?
Yeah. Perfection is only in Christ, you know? And so that's how I looked at it, you know. Excuse me. Not being perfect will allow you to come down, so to speak, and not, you know, think that I'm being a hypocrite. You know, you know, I've done all these things. I can't come to Christ yet. I might be still involved in it, but he accepts you as you are, you know, and so that's good enough, right?
That's actually my next question.
That's good enough, right?
Yeah, so I think that you already answered it, but now what does good enough mean to you? What is that? If you're good enough today, what's that mean?
Yeah, if you're good enough today, just show up as you are, you know, you give people your time. I think when you know, show up as you are, you know, you can love on others and you can be happy for them in their space because I'm okay with who I am. When we show up and I'm thinking, oh, I need to be better than who I am, it's hard for me to be happy for you because I think I'm deserving of it. You know, it's hard when something happens to you bad. It's hard for me to mourn with you if I think you deserve it.
Right.
You know, so for me, just show up as you are, be there for people as their support and love on them. You know, that's good enough. You know, that's the way I look at it. I told you I'm a simple person, simple man, and so I try to love outwardly, show it in action, and just be there authentically who I am. And I hope that's good enough.
No, I think that simplicity is sometimes more powerful than all the other things that make things complex. So I think that will again help and be powerful for a lot of different people. How can people connect?
You can connect with me on social media. I don't know if I show my book out there, you know, on there. So social media, Blessed by Change, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. I'm on there. Also my email is blessed by change. No, my website is blessedbychange.com on there. So you can reach me on there if you need anything speaking or just need a word or encouragement or anything. Follow me on social media. My book is on Amazon.com. I got it on paperback, hardback, Audible, ebook, you know, so I got all those. And I actually have two. So I have Blessed by Change, the Journeyman's Edition. I also have a workbook. You know, I'm going to eventually start, I call cohorts to where you can get the workbook. It'll walk you through my mindset, chapter by chapter in the workbook. I tell you my mindset. Then I ask you questions to reflect on your journey, you know, to your own redemption. So if you are struggling or you struggle with faith, temptations, or anything that you know, may think or look at, like I might not want to go to the church just yet, but if you were to get my book and read it, the workbook goes hand in hand with it. It just walks you through my journey.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I want everybody to understand. I think, you know, I said your wife was amazing, but I think you are too. I appreciate you coming. And I think that your story will be impactful for a lot of people. My guests are never the same,
Yeah.
and that's intentional, right? But I want people to understand that there are so many different walks of life, and we all come from these different journeys, but our processes kind of are similar. We're all just trying to do the best that we can, and we're just trying to make an impact in this world in some way, and also make other people understand that there's a community of people who are willing to help you and that you're important and that we want you to keep on going and to keep being hopeful. And so I think that's a great segue for us to thank you first for showing
yeah.
today. I really appreciate it. But we want everybody to, one, go buy Mario's book, Blessed by Change. Get on Amazon, go follow him on social media, like, subscribe, and make sure you show him some love. But also, if you've been inspired by his story, give him some feedback there as well. And remember, we want you to be here. We want to build a community for people to understand that you are good enough today. And we want to stay hopeful for tomorrow. We can change. We can do all the things that we want to do, but we're absolutely good enough today.
Hope for tomorrow, good enough today. Oh yeah, hope for tomorrow, good enough today.